Hey, it's Rod Yates here. Welcome to Mastering Events, an Audience Republic podcast. Each episode, I'll be talking to some of the world's most accomplished event professionals to discover how they got where they are today, the lessons they've learned throughout that journey, and their insights around event marketing and maximizing ticket sales. My guest today is Steve Oberman, Executive Vice President and Head of Music at C-Tickets North America. Steve and his team oversee the ticketing for hundreds of festivals and events every year, making him the perfect person to talk about trends and best practices in the ticketing space. He actually began his music industry career in management, working alongside artists like Velvet Revolver, which we also dig into during the conversation. But we started a little further back in Steve's life with his introduction to music. All right. Well, if we look at your employment history, whether it being in ticketing or artist management before that, clearly music is important to you, and I presume has played a big role in your life. Where did that love of music come from initially?
Yeah, I've always been passionate about music. My dad has an amazing record collection and always had records playing in the house and turned me on to a bunch of cool stuff. He took me to my first record store, and the first records I ever purchased were the Pac-Man Fever LP. As well as Jam On It by Nucleus. It was in the middle of the breakdance craze, and it's still one of my favorite songs. So those were my two purchases.
That's great. And did your dad take you to a show? What was your first show?
So I went to the Lionel Richie Dancing on the Ceiling tour.
Wow.
And that was at the Forum, the old Forum, and that was fun. We went to go see Boingo Boingo at the Universal, which was awesome. I wish I could see them now. And then I started going to shows on my own. So I started pretty early, so it was cool. My dad's still around and still collecting records at yard sales and everything else. So nice. we still chat about music whenever we can.
Nice. What do you remember of that Lionel Richie show? The very first experience.
I remember the Forum seemed huge, and I remember seeing the Lakers play there, so I was excited. Also, during the Dancing on the Ceiling song, he attached himself to cables and, like Pink does now, kind of like soared over the crowd and was dancing on the ceiling sort of thing. So I was like, back then that was pretty cool. I'd never seen that before. So
that is cool. And if I'm right in thinking, I think I've read you talk about you have a love of SoCal punk rock history. Was that when you started gravitating towards gigs yourself and your own music and discovering music? Was that kind of where you went to?
Yeah, so I got into skateboarding, and I was super into it. And in Southern California at that time, if you were a skateboarder, you listened to punk rock. That's what you did. The two cultures went hand in hand. It was played at every skate park and at every park. Anywhere you would go, you'd hear Black Flag or something like that in the background. It also helped that my best friend Paul had these two cute older sisters who were punk / goth, and they were so cool, with their dyed black hair and blue docks, and I wanted to be into anything they were into, and so and this is interesting. Like back then, it seems weird now. There was like punk rock gangs in Los Angeles, and so they had these boyfriends who were in a punk gang called the Mickey Mouse Club, and so we'd hang out with them, and it felt very dangerous and cool. But I was in 5th grade, so I have no idea. I have no idea what they were thinking, hanging out with someone my age. But we had fun.
I remember speaking with Fat Mike from NoFX, and he was talking about those punk rock gangs and how kind of violent, particularly the LA punk scene, could have been in those early days. Did you witness any of that?
I was a little too young. Like, I know what you're talking about. You always hear about the transition from the more artsy scene, like at the Mask and everything in Los Angeles, to the more, kind of Orange County dominated hardcore scene, which had all the violence. I was a little too young to see that happen. But, because of skateboarding, I was really drawn to the faster and more aggressive stuff because it was perfect for skateboarding. So, we'd go see bands play at this place called the Country Club in the San Fernando Valley, which was pretty, it felt dangerous. I don't know if it actually was, but back then it was. And, we'd see Bad Religion and 7 Seconds and Circle Jerks and stuff. And then after that, I would start going to more hardcore bands, even some from Southern California, like Reason to Believe and Instead and Heroin, right. And even some more of the like arty stuff like Drive Like Jehu. And those shows were a lot less violent. It was very frowned upon, and there was like a corner being turned where, people would just kind of stand and watch and bop their heads. So that's
Okay.
that's how most of the shows were for me.
Yeah. And at this point, are you thinking about a career in music?
It was always a possibility. Growing up in Los Angeles, you're around the industry constantly, so it's a very real possibility. I started interning. I guess it was my first music job. Was for a guy that worked at Delicious Vinyl, which was a hip hop label, but he was putting out hardcore records on the side, and he had me calling record stores when those existed to talk about the bands with the buyers at the stores when those existed, and then send them a promo copy. So I got paid $10 an hour for that, and it was kind of cool. That's how community was then, where you'd call the buyer of a store in Iowa, and I'd be like, who's cool out there? Who should I be checking out? And he'd be telling me bands, and I'd order the music. That's how you heard about music then. So
Right.
it was kind of a fun job.
Okay. And then I guess is your first sort of serious job in music, is that when you move into working with management? I think GSL management was the first place, and then Azov Music Management, which I believe became Frontline Management. Were they sort of your first sort of serious roles in music?
Pretty much, yeah. I kind of bounced around the music business until I found management. Management appealed to me because you got to see all aspects of an artist's business and keep all parts moving in sync with each other, which I thought was pretty cool. And I still believe artist management is where you find some of the most creative and innovative people in the industry. You have to be a specialist at everything. You need to know how to, negotiate record deals and maybe not anymore, but then it was important. How then to manage the internal politics of a record label, which was a feat in itself.
Right.
Make sure your artist remained a priority. No licensing and merchandising, and you had to know the live business side inside and out because that's where the money was. So before GSL, I learned about management from a guy called Jeff Jampel, who's now a master in managing legacy artist estates. But back then, he was really into breaking new artists, and I helped him on some of his projects for a while. And then I went on my own. GSL was kind of a thing that I started with my buddy Sonny, who had an indie label called GSL Records that were putting out some really cool arty, hardcore, and punk records. And I pitched Sonny on the idea to run a management arm of GSL Records called GSL Management, in conjunction with what he was doing. And you know what? It didn't. I'll be honest. It didn't really work out. What I learned was that arty, punk, and hardcore bands don't really need management, and they certainly don't have a lot of commissionable income. So then
Right.
when Azov came calling, I kind of transitioned into that world.
And I mean, Azov has been involved with numerous huge acts over the years: Eagles, Aerosmith, Guns N' Roses, Van Halen, to name just a few. Who were you involved with in terms of your day-to-day duties? Were you involved with any artists of that caliber?
So Velvet Revolver was who I was brought in to help these two managers who were handling them. And then one of the managers left, and I began day-to-day managing the band. But that was an interesting time. I mean, like you said, Irving was buying management companies and combining them into frontline management. And at that time, Azov Management, he was cutting it down to the acts that he was personally involved with, which was like the Eagles and Van Halen and maybe a few others. Velvet Revolver was not going to stay under Irving. And we were told to choose one of the new management companies under Frontline that we wanted to be a part of. So Dana, who was one of the main managers there, ended up choosing Jordan Feldstein's Career Artist Management, and so she and I moved downstairs from the 10th floor to the 9th floor to
Right.
partner up with that crew. One of the cool things that I remember from that era that didn't, again, I didn't seem that cool to me at the time, but like now is like, wow, that was really cool, was that, there was so many smart managers and good acts all in the same office. Irving was on the 10th floor with all of his legends. We were down one floor with Jordan at Cam, and we had Velvet Revolver, Maroon 5, and Megadeth. Down the hall, Jeffrey Azoff and Kevin Kusatsu had Diplo and Major Lazer and some others. Andy Gould was a couple doors down and had Axl Rose at the time, and actually got him to put out Chinese Democracy. So that's a feat. He also had Morrissey and some other metal bands. Then there was a bullpen in the middle, kind of where the assistant sat. And then across from my office was Simon Renshaw, who had the Dixie Chicks. Next to Renshaw was Rich Egan with Hard 8 Management. who had Dashboard Confessional and Get Up Kids and all that stuff, and Jim Morey down the hall, who handled Miley Cyrus at the high point of Hannah Montana, like which was fun to watch. Like that was mania. And so you can imagine, what that was like to be able to just walk down the hall and just ask opinions of these great managers and have them help you with stuff. It was a fun time.
That's an incredible environment. I mean, I'm sure you learned a lot at your time there, but if you think to just some sort of key basics that you learned in that, does anything stand out which still perhaps informs how you operate today?
Have a good team. Pick a good team. Your team is crucial. No one knows everything, even if they think they do. And unfortunately for me and some of the artists I was working with, addiction ruins lives. And that was an issue for a lot of my artists. And that part of the business was not fun, of course.
Of course, yeah. Were there any, I mean, you must have seen some amazing things there in terms of either the artists you worked with or some of the artists that your colleagues worked with. Are there any just kind of magical moments that always come to mind when you think about those times and those artists?
Yeah, I mean, my first tour in a bus rather than a van happened then, and that was fun. And I was never really like a big Guns N' Roses fan because I was too punk. But seeing Slash or Duff's name pop up on my phone when they'd call was always kind of a trip to see. I think the real pinch me moments came from later in ticketing, being able to sign some of my favorite music festivals and venues, and then standing side stage at a bunch of these, watching some of my favorite bands of all time. Like that never gets old. I still look forward to that, and it's still. That's the reason I got into this business, is to see great bands up close. So that still gets me to this day.
Well, when you think about your move into ticketing, I think, was it Flavorist Ticketing in 2011? Was that kind of your move into the industry? So more than a decade in the industry now, in the ticketing specific industry. Did that experience that you had in management, has that helped you in your role today? Does it give you a different perspective, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, the relationships that I built there, I still rely on and still hold dear to me. Obviously, that's what this business runs on. If anyone can take anything from any of these podcasts, relationships run this business, period. I think we all probably know that. I understood ticket pricing strategies and, tour marketing, which helped. I was working bands with legendary tour marketers like Ali McGregor at CAA and Michelle Bernstein, formerly of William Morris, and watch them do their thing. I mean, there's no better education when it comes to tour marketing and music marketing than watching those two do their thing. And, contracting. Ticketing is really a rights acquisition business at times. So being able to make good contracts and make good deals is an essential part. And I got that from the time doing management.
In terms of some of the marketing things you just mentioned then, and being able to work alongside someone like Ali, what did you learn from a marketing perspective? Because presumably at C-Tickets, you have event organizers asking you for best practices and probably around things like marketing, promotions, amongst many other things. What have you learned from your experience with Ali, but also your experience just in the business about what are some of the marketing best practices when it comes to tour and festival marketing?
So first, I'm not a marketing specialist like Ali or anyone else. So I don't pretend to be an expert in this world. But you're right, clients do ask, and I have been around long enough where I can kind of have seen what works and what doesn't work. I advise my clients to try to focus on the well-proven psychological concepts that have been driving sales since before we were born. Read some Malcolm Gladwell and Seth Godin, and learn about how people make decisions and why people follow others to make decisions. I talk about FOMO a lot. FOMO is an extremely strong motivator that actually moves the needle on sales. Like, I've actually seen it. So, most people think FOMO as a concept is just people don't want to miss out on something their friends are going to. But that's only part of it. I think almost a more important part is FOMO about pricing. People really want to get the best possible price and feel pretty dumb when they don't. And so I'm a huge proponent of creating multiple price levels for any show, and make sure that you're focusing your marketing on when prices will go up and that it's the last chance to get a ticket as cheap as it is right now, and make the price jumps significant so that people feel that difference. I think that's something that maybe Ali and Michelle said to me once, like it can't just be $10 or $15 on a big show. It's got to be something people feel, or else that FOMO doesn't kick in. But on the back end, we always see spikes right before price changes. And if you're working the social media right and your email right, those will always lead to increased sales.
And is that even more so? I mean, cost of living is obviously a huge issue at the moment. There's also a lot more artists on the road, it feels like. There's a lot more acts coming through town. There's that demand for people's dollar. Do you find that pricing strategy is even more important these days? Or is it still it's just always been important?
I think it's always been important. I think that the cost of living problems haven't hit our industry yet. I'm going to get a bunch of emails saying, "Screw you, dude. They're totally, they're totally getting me." But from what I've seen, people are still buying tickets more than ever. People are having their best years, and there hasn't really been any price resistance when it comes to really good experiences, especially in the VIP part. You can price it too high for GA. That will decrease sales. But man, those VIP tickets, there's just no limit so far to what you can charge for a real exclusive experience, not just good bathrooms, but something worthwhile that people want that they can't get anywhere else.
The act of just even setting a ticket price, so for a GA, but then also for those VIP experiences, what is the best way to go about that? What sort of data points do you look at? How much of it is gut instinct? What are the key things that will determine how you set ticket price?
Just make sure it makes sense logically. Look at where similar shows in your market have priced similar tickets and how well those sold. And some of the basics. Emphasize your multi-day tickets first. Don't go on sale with single days at the same time as your multi-days. I don't understand why people do that. I always had an idea about pricing that no one's ever taken me up on because they think it's crazy. But I always thought it would be interesting to be like just super transparent about pricing and your expenses. Like, here's my talent budget. Here's what I'm paying for rentals and electricity. Here's all the various fees I pay. Lay out your overhead and explain why tickets are priced the way they are. I think fans would appreciate that and really kind of get a better view as to why some festival tickets are more than others. Maybe you're paying more rent or something else. So anyway, if anyone wants to steal that, you're welcome to it. Although no one has taken me up on it yet, and I've pitched it many times. So it's probably a crazy idea.
What's the resistance to it, do you think?
I mean, the showing the inner workings of how festival, like, just no one's really interested in showing what their budgets are. And I get it, like, everyone has different deals and may not want to show it off, but you can put it in general ways where, just here's expenses, here's artists, here's talents, and all that kind of stuff without actually, I paid Green Day this much. You don't have to do that. But I don't think the general public understands why tickets are priced the way they are and how expensive and difficult it is to produce a festival. And, not to expect price to go up every year, considering that the festival's prices are going up every year. So, I'm always a big fan of transparency overall. And I think being more transparent about what it takes, might reduce some of the stress about higher ticket prices. Just
right.
a thought.
Yeah, no, I love it. You mentioned the psychology of why people buy tickets, which is something that I think is really interesting. And what do you think are the main criteria that people weigh up when they're looking at buying a ticket? Do you think it's price, lineup, the values of the actual event, of the event organizers? What do you think is, or what are you seeing is the main sort of criteria that people tend to weigh up?
Number one is lineup, for sure. Number two is price. Number three is location, and then everything else is a distant fourth.
Okay. And then in terms of lineups, have you seen any changes in the way that organizers are putting together lineups over the past couple of years?
Well, I mean, you have Jeffrey Schulman putting on those hyper-targeted genre festivals, which have been going over amazing. I was just at one Saturday down in Huntington Beach. It was a dream to see a lot of the bands that I grew up listening to all in the same place. So, I mean, I love those. Never would I have thought that I would have gotten to see all the bands I like from a genre at one time. And I think, the proof is in the pudding, and they're all selling out. And I think he does a great job in that. So there is that way to go. And also, I think people are trying to take into account what the fans are telling them. Fans want to see more diversity on stage. And I think lineups have been reflecting that. Most lineups have been reflecting that in really good ways. No matter what the genre, there's always diversity that can be displayed. And I think people expect that more. And that's been nice to see. And also, lineups I'm hearing are being booked a year, sometimes 2 years in advance. The competition between festivals for artists and not hitting other radius clauses and everything has become crazy. And so you really have to plan in advance if you want someone big headlining your festival.
Just returning to that idea of, I guess, niche festivals or really targeted genre festivals. You mentioned a festival that you went to. What was that one called?
It's called Darker Waves.
Darker Waves, okay. And When We Were Young has obviously been a huge success as well, particularly in that, I guess, 90s emo sort of slash pop punk genre. Do you think for a new festival organizer, is trying to appeal to everyone no longer the way to go? Do you think that niche is where things are at the moment?
I mean, was it ever the way to go? I mean, I think that it was always a bad idea to try and be everything to everyone. Most successful festivals have started out of a genre. Some have expanded into multiple as they've become a brand and not needed to rely on lineups as much. But all the ones that I can think of that I admire all started at least with an idea that I'm going to get a bunch of bands from this genre together and cultivate an audience that way. So I would never try and be everything to everyone. I think that's always a failure.
You mentioned, I guess, a festival's brand, and once they've established that brand, then perhaps they can branch out a little bit with some of the artists they might book. What do you think are the key things, particularly again for a new festival? What are the things that they must get right when they're building their brand? Like, how important is that in establishing a festival?
The most important thing. I mean, how else do you distinguish yourself from the hundreds of festivals that get started every year if you don't have your brand in place when you start planning? You're in big trouble. And when when festivals come to me early looking for deals, and I sort of start asking questions about, well, who you're trying to appeal to, what's your brand, what's your lineup, and they're kind of all over the place, it's a big red flag. If you don't know your identity and what you're going for, you're going to have problems. I mean, who do you market to when you have no brand and kind of a wide open lineup? It just makes life so much harder.
Have you seen anyone do it really well that springs to mind in terms of building that brand?
Yeah, I mean, Punk Rock Bowling in Las Vegas. When you look like me and you like the music that I like, you go to Punk Rock Bowling. I mean, that's just what you do. If you're into techno, you go to Movement in Detroit. That's their brand. They've stuck by it for years and years and years. I guess that's not developing. I mean, they did develop when they started. Both those festivals have been around over a decade. Punk Rock Bowling too, but those are good kind of examples of people who have done it right and have stuck with it and have been successful year after year after year because they super serve their audience and really push their brand. And I think that's been a great way to do that.
You mentioned that sometimes festivals or organizers will come to you because they want to sell tickets through C-Tickets. For a festival organizer or an event organizer, what do you think is important when it comes for a ticketing company? If they're looking for a ticketing company to partner with, what are some of the key things they should be looking for in a partner?
I think it comes down to what can that ticketing partner help you do in order to grow the festival. And I'm not talking about throwing a bunch of marketing out there or anything, but it's all the platforms and technology are pretty similar. Like there's some people who do one thing better and some people who do another thing better. Because we have the advantage of seeing hundreds of festivals in a year, I see things over and over again that most people don't. And so if, like, say, a first year festival comes to me and says something like, in our first year, we're going to have 30,000 people, and then we're going to scale to 80 over the next 3 years, and we're going to have RFID first year, and we're going to do cashless payments first year. And that's someone who you want to stay away from. You don't want someone who has unrealistic expectations to kind of that's hard to work with. Now, a good ticketing company will say, okay, you need to back up for a second. Like, these are not realistic expectations. This is what you should expect, and this is why, and this is what I suggest. Scale it back. Don't do RFID for first year. You're going to lose money anyway. Let's try and lose as little as possible to set you up for success on your future festivals. Not many ticketing companies do that because that's not really what they see their job being. And I think for festivals specifically, there's so much advice to be given by people who see it every day that I think that's something that people who are looking for a ticketing company in the festival space specifically should really be paying attention to.
What else are you seeing? You see hundreds of festivals a year. You must have a really good idea about what's working, what's not, what the trends are. What are you seeing? It's a very broad question, but in terms of things that you are seeing working in the festival space, and we've spoken about a few of them in terms of genre specific and having a really clear brand, but are you just seeing any other trends across the festival space that really stick out?
People demand better food. You can't just have island noodles and call it a day. You need people really expect quality options. I feel like at festivals, and I think organizers have done a good job in incorporating that. People expect good VIP experiences, and like I said before, they're willing to pay for it. And I think that's a great revenue driver for festivals who are looking to earn a little more. Those are very general trends, but there's also, you can get into marketing trends, and you've had two of my favorite marketers on the show. The episode with Mike Maurer and with Jamie from DWP, those should be required listening for any festival or venue marketers. I don't have to repeat what they've said because it's been said. But one of the trends that I noticed among the people that you've had on is just how sophisticated marketing has gotten in terms of data and in terms of hyper targeting and stuff like that. A few years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when you'd go to conferences, there would always be like the social media panel, and there'd always be some guy who's like, you have to have a Facebook page. I can't say it enough. Like, if you don't have it, it's just like, it was so basic then, like, have a Facebook page. That was, that was advice. And now it's like, how can I configure custom Google Tag Manager pixels so that I can, really use my TikTok contests well, or something like that. And that's cool. I think people are starting to really pay attention to, attribution, which I've always had a problem with, that I think people don't really have good ideas of what sales should be attributed to, and just much more sophistication that will bring better audiences into the festival. I feel like I got way off track on that one. Was that no. What you were talking about?
Yeah, no, that was great. Okay. Thank you. No, that was all made perfect sense. One of the things you mentioned was that fans have, or audiences have, more expectations around food. For example, they expect a better food experience at the events they go to. What events are you seeing that you work with that are evolving really well to take into account the new things that customers expect, whether it's food or whether it's something else?
I mean, anyone who remains successful year after year is doing something right. I don't think it's called out enough how difficult that really is. You can have one year where you just kind of miss on the lineup, and that'll put you out of business. It's so hard to remain successful and have fans remain loyal, which is where the whole brand thing comes in again. And the two festivals I mentioned earlier are great examples of people who have, like I said, super served their fans and have really adopted to what they need through the years. I'm trying to think of some of the newer ones. We have some, like North Coast Music Festival in Chicago is one that has adapted and really listens and pays attention to what the fans want. Pitchfork, one of my favorites that we do, has evolved from just something to showcase Condé Nast to an actual legitimate music festival that I don't miss. I mean, those are one of the ones that I always go to. So those are some examples of ones who are really taking into account the change people are expecting and making good on it. At Pitchfork, there was, I think, like a food truck or something, and I went back to it like 4 times during the festival, and that never happens. You're always like, oh, okay, I'll try this one. That sucked. I'll try this one.
Yeah.
And it's just, they're having good stuff now, which is so much better than hot dogs and hamburgers.
That's right. You mentioned RFID earlier. Are you seeing it becoming rolled out a lot more across festivals? And are you seeing it make a difference to bottom lines and spending at festivals?
Yes and no. If it makes sense. Let me start it this way. A lot of people come to us wanting to do RFID, and I find myself talking people out of it a lot of the time. It's really effective if you need it. If you have long lines, if you have a lot of people, and you need to get them through spaces quickly, there's nothing faster than RFID. It's also great because of the data pickup, where you have everyone register the bands, and you get all the data and stuff like that. But the thing is, you can do that with other methods without going through the cost of RFID. The thing is, RFID is expensive. The bracelets cost a lot in relation to what they are, and the services and the portals cost a lot, and most of the time you don't really need it unless you have a specific issue that you're trying to solve. Those issues again are just like, if you have lines, RFID will kill it. If your bars back up, or if you have a lot of shrinkage among your vendors and you want to keep them a little more honest, having RFID and cashless payments, or just RFID payments can be very helpful. But I would avoid it, and I constantly talk people out of it if it's just, oh, this other festival does it, we should do it too. It's like, why add levels of complexity to something that could be simple and easy? Keep it simple. That's the motto. Plus, fans have to pay more for the fulfillment of it. It's, what is it, $10, $15 extra onto the ticket to have wristbands mailed to you. It's just gotta make sense. So we do RFID all the time, but we really do try and keep it to where it's appropriate.
And when you think about, again, you attend hundreds of festivals, and you must see things that work when it comes to ingress and egress, and obviously talking to festival organizers and understanding what works for them. What are you seeing the most successful or the best festivals get right when it comes to ingress and egress?
Staffing. Ingress and egress, to me, is a math problem. That's all it is. How many people are coming in, and how fast does your ticketing system allow people in? And then you have we have set standards. If there's this many people coming, you need this many lanes because our scanners can get in this many people per hour. So it should be a pretty cut and dry thing. It should be. But a lot of promoters ignore how important that stuff is, and they'll understaff it, or they just won't pay for the lanes, or something happens, and then the ticketing company is forced to kind of scramble to make it happen without the proper equipment, or without the proper amount of lane space or stuff like that. And we just do the best. We do the best we can. So normally, if you see lines that are from going in and out of a festival, there's usually two things that have happened. One, the internet has gone out, and that happens.
Right.
Or two, probably the ticketing company or whoever's handling the on-site stuff just weren't provided with the necessary means to be able to run a good entrance.
What happens if the internet goes out? It's all manual.
If the internet goes out, it's all manual. We bring backups on backups on backups. So for us, the internet never goes out because if it does, you just bring in your satellite road case or something else, and then you kind of run it temporarily until the internet provider can bring it back up. But I'm sure there's been times where all the backups have failed too, and then you just kind of wing it till it comes back online.
Sure. Do you think there's always a lot of talk about biometrics in ticketing and event access? Do you see that in the near future?
I think it's cool. They're using it now at airports to board planes, and I thought it was great. I know that there's privacy concerns and stuff like that, but I thought it was really convenient not to have to find the boarding pass again and just walk up holding all my stuff and walk right in. I would love to do that for a festival. I'd love to use either my hand, face, eye, whatever it takes. So I hope that we see more of that. I think that's where the future's headed.
Do you think 5 years, 10 years, is it that kind of thing that you can put I'd say rough
more likely 10 years than 5 years.
Right. What are some of the trends that you're seeing in sales cycles at the moment in terms of, are events staying on sale longer than they have in the past? Have those periods changed at all? There's lots of talk about late buying. Like what are you sort of seeing in terms of sales cycles and customer behavior?
Well, so from the festival perspective, I see festivals never going off sale. The country world kind of, I think was the forefront on that. They were going on sale for the next year's festival at that year's festival, and they were doing it for years, and no one was kind of paying attention. And now I feel like, rock promoters are starting to do it, and hip hop promoters and stuff like that. I think that is a good idea, and I think trends like that will continue. I mean, why ever be off sale? It doesn't make sense, really. So I think that is going to change the buying patterns, because I think, for the festivals we do that now, there's a significant amount of people buying at the festival, and having people commit in advance. So I'm impressed. I mean, I wouldn't that's not something that I would have considered doing. Who knows what I'm going to be doing next year? But when and you're going to go each and every year, having that best price and being able to secure it right there is something important. So there's early buying, and then you're right. There is late buying, and then nothing in the middle. No, I'm just kidding. But late buying is certainly a thing since COVID. You have to expect it, and you have to watch your cash flow to make sure that you don't run out before those late purchases come through. There's a lot of side effects to late buying, and there's also it's we're going to implement Afterpay, because we want people to be able to buy at the last minute and be able to pay it off over time and stuff like that. I think that's going to become more and more popular, and more adoption and stuff like that. So yeah, I think early buying is becoming a trend. Late buying is certainly becoming a trend, and the challenge is how to bridge it in the middle, right?
Right. And that early buying, so you said you're actually seeing people while they're at the festival, this year's festival, they're already buying tickets for next year's festival.
Significant amounts of people.
And so how is that message, I'm not sure if you'll know this, but how is that messaging being sent out to the people at the festival? Are they getting texts? Are they getting emails? Is it already before they even get to the festival that they've been told that they'll be on sale? Do you see anything of the best ways that's being communicated?
Wow, what a great question, and I should know that answer because I should be paying more attention to that, but
That's
I don't
okay.
actually know. I imagine it's going to be before, during, and after. Oh, I do know. I have seen people make announcements from the stage between acts. Like, if you're having a good time, go to that booth over there and secure your festival for next year. But again, it's not something I would do. So for me to see thousands of people walk up and buy for next year 365 days in advance at a festival is just, it's not something I would have put my money on as being popular, and I would have been dead wrong. And so there's something to learn there from the country festivals, and we should all be doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then with the late ticket buying, you spoke earlier about the importance of payment tiers and how they can really move the needle. Is it things like that which will try and encourage people to try and create some sort of urgency in people so that they don't become late ticket buyers? Is that one of the main activations you see working?
Yeah. Payment plans help a lot with that. Payment plans are and should be an essential part of any festival's marketing plan. They're absolutely crucial, and it really does work. I can tell you, I've seen all the back end numbers, and they absolutely work. You can use them for your FOMO campaigns too. Here's your last chance to get a 5 payment plan. Here's your last chance to get a 4 payment plan, and all that sort of stuff. And you will always see pickup around those. Adoption rates on payments plans around payment plans could be very, very large, and some festivals don't care. But I think it's the festivals who really market it and use it for what it's worth that really taking advantage of getting extra sales from it. So I think that's an essential part of any marketing plan, to have people buy earlier, is to give them the chance to not have to put out a big lump payment all at once.
Right. And I guess you get that commitment, don't you? Even if it's $10 down, as an organizer, you've got a commitment now from someone that they're coming, which must make planning a lot easier than whether people, sometimes all they have to do to pre-register is put their email address in. If they're actually now putting $10 down to start a payment plan, then there's a real commitment there, which I imagine makes for a smoother process.
Yeah. Although there's a dispute in the festival world, depending on who you talk to, on whether the low deposit payment plans are actually beneficial or actually detrimental. $10 is such a low commitment that it's not really a commitment the way that you just said. People have no problem abandoning the $10 just to see if they're going to get that lower tier. So we've seen, again, a couple things. We've seen huge abandonment rates when we have the low deposit payment plans. But some organizations see that as marketing and getting warm leads from it, which I totally see also. So, some people don't mind the abandonment because it gives you warmer leads, and some people get fees when a payment plan is forfeited. So, it's just extra cash. So
Yeah.
there's a lot that goes on behind it depending on who you talk to. Some people swear by it, and some people just don't really like the idea.
Right. And for people who think $10 is too little, do you think it's better like 20%, 40%, 50%? Is that the sort of ballpark where you think that's a genuine commitment?
I think so. Yeah. I admittedly haven't looked at data on that, but now that you brought it up, I'm kind of interested to go back and kind of see that. So I'll let you know after I go back and look at the numbers about where the drop off really falls off, like at what percent. I'll let you know.
Thank you. You mentioned cart abandonment, which is such a huge thing in ticketing, obviously. When you think about like a smooth ticket buying process and the things that you can do to try and minimize cart abandonment, what are the best practices that you see as a ticketing platform to really make that experience smooth and so that people buy the ticket?
There's been a lot of research done in e-commerce regarding cart abandonment and what causes it. It's not rocket science to like look it up and figure out what the big things are, but surprisingly some don't. Number one, from our data and just in general knowledge, if you have to create an account before you get to the checkout page, the cart abandonment on that is massive. If you don't have guest checkout in any industry, cart abandonment goes through the roof on that one. The second one, that's pretty obvious, is going to be price. If you have a high price up front, people don't even get to the checkout page. I'm sure you guys do this, but we have our clients using heat maps about where people are, when they abandon. So you can see where they are on the page, and a lot of it, it's right on the price, and they look at the price and then they're out of there. Then they hit that back button. Keeping in mind those kind of just logical sort of small things that can really help cart abandonment is important. And also this goes into, I'm going to get in trouble for this one, but this is that's what I do. That's what I do. So there's a lot of talk in the ticketing industry right now and in Washington about all-in pricing, and there's a perception that perceptions kind of has a negative connotation. That's not how I mean it. There's thoughts that ticket buyers don't like when they see one price and then they go to the checkout page and they see a much higher price, and that's absolutely true. However, it's so documented over and over again in many e-commerce markets that putting it on the second page works. And when you have all-in pricing, the cart abandonment increases, and you're not in parity with the rest of the market. At C-Tickets, most of the stuff I'm saying here is the opinion of Steve Oberman and does not represent the views of C-Tickets or Vivendi or anything else. But C-Tickets as an organization are, we're very we're pro all-in pricing, but it has to work. The only way it works is if everyone's doing it, and the only way everyone's going to do it is if it's been something that's legislated. Because until then, anyone who is doing all-in pricing now is putting themselves at a disadvantage over their competitors who are not. And we love transparency. We all love transparency, but we also love selling tickets. And why put yourself at a disadvantage? I'm hoping that whatever bills pass will have, all-in prices, but it's got to be all or nothing, because you're just going to hurt yourself if you don't.
That's so interesting. So the fact that even when people see the entire price up front, that can actually make them abandon cart, as opposed to saying the ticket's $100 and then getting to the second page and now it's $125. You're seeing that if they thought it was $125 at the beginning of the process, then they might abandon. That price might be too high for them.
Absolutely. It's not what I think. It's what's StubHub won in front of Congress and a few years ago, and they testified to the fact that they tried all-in pricing, and they lost so much market share that they had to abandon it. So this has been proven not just in other industries, but in our industry itself. So secondary is a little different than primary, but it's something we all want. It just has to be done done right. So, make sure that you're not shooting yourself in the foot by doing things that are so easy not to do.
Yeah. That idea about with the heat maps, and you can actually see that if someone gets to the price and it's too much for them and they abandon the cart pretty much. If you feed that back to an event organizer, what can they do? Because by the sounds of things, they've perhaps overpriced their event. Is there anything they can do at that point? Because reducing ticket sales or reducing ticket price or doing 2-for-1 offers can, I guess, lead to that perception that, okay, things aren't going particularly well. Like, what happens if a festival has overpriced? How do they fix that?
Such a good question. I love that one. So you are right. You should never discount. You should never go lower than what you had priced before. You never want to burn your early adopters. That's a terrible idea, and that will kill a festival. So what do you do? What do you do if your price is out of whack with where it should be? I would ask Allie and Michelle. No, just look. I don't know, but I think what I would advise off the top of my head is to come up with, flash sales and buy one get ones and family 4-packs and promotions that kind of add value that might not be monetary in exchange for tickets. So, the key is to not have people who bought early feel burned, but also attract people who might be price sensitive. So I would love for you to ask that question to an actual marketing expert, because I would like to know what the answer is also. But that's what I would probably advise off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm seeing it now. We're coming up to Thanksgiving in the US. So I'm seeing my inbox is becoming flooded with Black Friday sales from promoters for their events. And I guess that's a way where I'm not thinking, oh, the event's not doing very well. I'm just thinking, okay, that's part of the Black Friday mayhem at the moment.
Exactly. And you don't have to wait for Black Friday. You can have, fee-free Fridays or,
Right.
2-for-1 Tuesdays or, there are ways you can do it. But I bet there's some really sophisticated answer that I'm not thinking of. But until then, I'm going to stick with what I said.
I like it. I like it. Last couple of things, Steve. You shared a really interesting article on LinkedIn. I think it was from IQ about queuing at events and little techniques that organizers can do to just make that whole queuing process less painful. And I think you sort of shared that and said that small things can make a big difference in the perception of waiting in a queue. What are some of those small things that you were referring to?
I've unfortunately been in two really dangerous situations that were basically riots at box offices, that both of which could have been avoided with better line management. And so I feel strongly about it because I felt unsafe at those times as bike rack was being thrown at the box office and stuff like that. So I think the first thing is to make sure that you have as few customer service questions as possible. These are the small things first. So, because you don't want people approaching customer service and having big lines. If you're doing RFID events and people have to pick up their RFID wristband on site, have a will call list as you can. Try and get people to pick up their wristbands, either have it mailed to them or if they buy after the mailing deadline, set up a will call a week before. Gulf Coast Jam does this. They in Florida, they set up at Dave & Buster's and they have a partnership where they have will call open at Dave & Buster's for the week before so that they have as many people picking up RFID bracelets as they can before the actual festival to reduce lines. So what I was thinking about in that article about the actual lines themselves, the instinct is to have people set up the bike rack and the vertical chutes that lead to each customer window, or each service person, whether it be customer service or guest list or something else. Oh, and by the way, festivals, I don't know why you guys don't have your guest lists off site. In my perfect world, guest lists will always be at a calm hotel nearby where you don't hear the music and get really excited, and people can be calm and call their contacts and look for lists. When you have guest list on site, it just adds a level of chaos and lines, usually from some entitled people that you just don't want. So that would be my advice on guest lists. But besides that was an aside. Instead of having those vertical chutes, because then people feel like, oh, I picked the wrong line. I'm gonna jump over and get to the shorter line because, oh man, this person is so slow. I want to go to that other one. Set up a snake line, like a snake configured line where there's one entrance and there's one exit, and there's someone at the front of the line who's saying, okay, you go to window 2, you go to window, kind of like the DMV,
Right.
like go to window 3, go to window 4. Again, psychology, that calms people down. People feel like it's fair that they're kept in line because everyone has the same opportunity. No one tries to jump over and try us, and try and change lanes, so to speak, to see if they can go faster. At that aforementioned festival that I was at this weekend, they did not do that. And it was rough at the guest list line and at the will call line. People were getting angry and people were jumping. And of course, there was no riot. We were all old there. No one was going to riot. It could have been like, I was thinking about this there actually, like, man, I wish they had just set up in a snake line because that avoids all the, all the frustration. So it seems like a really small, minute thing, but after you've been in a couple bad situations, you're like, just do it. Just do it. It's a much better situation.
It makes a lot of sense. And so does the idea of the guest list offsite. Like I've never seen that at a festival, but that makes a lot of sense.
I saw Insomniac do that first. I will give them credit at EDC probably like 10 years ago or something. And
Okay.
I'm like, this is great. And now, now all the big guys do it. Danny Wimmer and Disco Donnie, and they all have kind of taken the thing on that, and it's just such a better experience.
Yeah, nice. So when you peer into your crystal ball and you look at the festival and ticketing landscape in 2024 and beyond, what do you think that's going to look like? Can you see any emerging trends coming down the pipeline?
I love the festival landscape right now. I think it's healthier and more vibrant than it's ever been. And I base that on, there's so many I want to go to that look really fun and people are really getting it and the experiences look great. I just want to go to a bunch. I think creativity is at an all-time high. I speak to, I've probably spoken to every independent music festival promoter in the country. And the group that's out there now doing great stuff, just really creative people, and I foresee a great future for most of them, for almost all of them. So I'm really bullish about it. I think the trend of hyper curated festivals is on point and will continue. They don't have to be huge. They don't have to be these monstrosities in the middle of Vegas. Program me something that has 15,000 people to 10,000 people, with great bands, and we'll go see that. So I think that trend is emerging. I think having multiple festivals on the same site that are different festivals, but on the same site on multiple weekends to save production costs is a great trend and a great way to save on production costs. So if you want to have two different festivals, just have them one weekend after the other one. Another trend is the difficulty for festival producers to find insurance. Most insurance companies won't cover cancellation insurance without asking for 10% of whatever gross is, which is just not doable. And that affects us as ticketing people because we demand that they have cancellation insurance because we're pre-settling all the money and carrying all the risk. I don't know how that trend's going to end. The festivals need the ticketing companies to bankroll and to finance a lot of what they do. They need us to pre-settle funds, but they can't get insurance to protect us. So the risk to the ticketing companies makes ticketing companies want to slow down on the financing, which then hurts festivals. So it's a vicious cycle, and it's something that I think every ticketing company is thinking of. And I am curious to see how it all plays out. Hopefully insurance companies will become more comfortable with premiums and insuring festivals for different things, and giving the ticketing companies kind of support when we need to pre-settle funds. And next time we talk, we'll take a look at how that has all played out and see if there's been any changes. But that's a emerging trend at the moment.
Yeah, and I guess the weather, it doesn't help that trend. That's an issue, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Weather has been a big factor the past few years and will continue to be.
Yeah. Very last thing, earlier on in our conversation, you spoke about being able to work with some of the festivals that you loved, and I guess just being able to see some of your favorite bands. What springs to mind when you've said that? Like, what was one of the festivals you were thinking of, and one of the moments where you got to probably stand side of stage and see one of those acts up close?
Yeah. I was too young for Black Flag, one of the seminal punk bands out there. So when they played Punk Rock Bowling with Keith singing, who was my favorite singer, again, I'm going to get emails telling me that I'm wrong on that, but he is the best singer for Black Flag. And having him up there blasting through the songs, and I'm standing like a few feet away from him, I remember thinking like, this is crazy. Like, I never thought I would do something like that. There was another one I was telling my team about too. It wasn't something that I signed. It was at Street Scene, which was a San Diego festival a long time ago. And I was on stage for Public Enemy. And I was thinking, man, this little white guy from the Valley has no business standing on a Public Enemy stage. And yet here I am with those guys. Like, it's just, those are some of the coolest moments that I will always remember, and is really, again, the reason that I love this business, and keeps my passion for the live music industry going. So those two probably.
That's great. That's a great note on which to end. Thank you so much for your time, Steve. It's been so great chatting with you.
Thanks, you too. Appreciate it.